Today's reading comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 48. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife will let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord.' But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your heart, for you cannot make, or by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your words be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, 'An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.' But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that this was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be the children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Word of God, word of life.
We're continuing our Sermon on the Mount series, and we've been going week by week through the Sermon on the Mount, beginning with the Beatitudes, the blessings, and we're talking about this through the lens of the New Covenant. The New Covenant. And this New Covenant is a new promise, a new contract, a new relationship between God and God's people, you and me. And it is a contract that is not an outside-in contract, but it is a contract inside out, a contract written on our hearts, inside out, as opposed to outside in. So often we live in an outside-in world where we get judged by our successes and our failures, by our bank accounts, by everything that all of our actions get judged on a day-to-day basis. But the new covenant of this Sermon on the Mount is an inside-out relationship that God begins by loving us from the inside out. The places in our hearts and our lives that are most wounded, most filled with pain and sorrow and joy, God loves that part of you and wants that part of you to shine inside out. And so our first commandment is to rejoice and be glad, to let our lights shine out in the world. And we are called to be salt, and we are called to be light in the world, to let our lights shine. To let our lights shine. And our covenant begins with blessing. And then we get to kind of our part today. It's a lot of stuff in there. Wasn't there a lot of hard stuff? How many of you heard some hard stuff in those verses? Yeah? Heard that it was said, but I tell you. In this chapter, in this section of the Sermon on the Mount, we get 5 different things where Jesus says, you have heard that it said, but I tell you. You have heard that it was said. It usually refers in these to something from the Old Testament, from the Old Law, which Jesus said he was come to fulfill. But by fulfill, he kind of means to transform and to spin into a new direction, an inside-out direction. And so we're going to look at sort of external actions, and Jesus will take them and say, but I tell you, and it usually has something to do with an inside-out feeling. There's some stuff that I don't really want to talk about in this. It's just too hard and too difficult. You know how they say you shouldn't talk about religion and politics in mixed company, right? So I got a broom here, and so if it gets too tough, I'm just going to try to sweep it under the rug, okay? Is that all right if we just kind of sweep up the stuff we don't want to talk about under the rug? Okay, so I'm just going to keep this close at hand if it gets too tough, okay? Let's look at the things that we're actually going to talk about in here. You have heard that it said, don't murder, okay? Everybody write that down. JJ, write that down. Don't murder, okay? Everybody got that? If there's one thing you take home from here, you leave and remember, do not murder. Don't kill people, okay, Shannon? All right. But Jesus says, don't be angry. What? Do not commit adultery, you have heard it said. But I say, don't even lust. If you look with your eye, then cut it out. You have heard it said, don't make a false promise. But I say to you, don't even promise nothing at all. I think that's incorrect grammar. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, turn the other cheek. That can't be right. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That makes sense, right? But I say to you, love your enemy. There's got to be something wrong in the translation from the Greek to the English on that one, right? Jesus says, love your enemy. All this stuff is very, very challenging stuff. So I want to invite us to kind of, as we go through all this conversations, it's going to be a little bit of a different kind of a sermon today. I ask that we just kind of engage with some humility, engage with kind of a sense of care and seeking understanding, and that there's a spirit of love and grace that permeates our community and our church today. Can we promise to go in there with that kind of a spirit and attitude? And I believe that's what church is all about, that we come in to feel the healing grace of God. Is that all right? Okay, so let's we'll go one at a time. I'm going to skip through some that I don't really understand that well, and we'll go as best we can. Okay, the first one, you have heard it said, do not murder. But I say to you, don't be angry at your brother or your sister. How many of you grew up with a good Midwestern ethos that says anger is one of the worst 7 deadly sins in the world, right? How many of you learned that anger itself is bad? You guys are from Minnesota. You probably learned that, right? I learned it. Did you learn it in Minnesota a little bit? I was definitely discouraged from expressing any kind of anger whatsoever, so much that it kind of messes with your head, doesn't it? And I think probably all of us have a weird relationship with anger. And I've got 3 kind of types of anger, and maybe you can identify with one type or the other as I go through these. There's one, we look at the woman at the top with the little jail cell, and maybe that's her true self in the jail, incarcerated. And she looks like she's sort of, her anger has drawing her inward towards herself and perhaps isolating and removing herself away from community because the anger is so strong and intense. that can be an inward, very isolating, lonely anger. This is New York anger at the bottom. You never have to wonder if a New Yorker is angry or not. They'll definitely let you know if they're angry, okay? I say that as a converted New Yorker. How many of you can relate to the anger that just is like a tea kettle and then it just pours out of your ears and your nostrils and it's like a raging bull ready to go nuts, right? And then there's, Maisie wanted to make sure she missed Daddy today, right? She wanted to let everybody know that she missed Daddy, right? So look at the little girl. What is she trying to do with her anger? She's trying to manipulate Mom or Dad, isn't she? Sometimes we use that anger to try to kind of get what we want, right? But is anger itself bad? Have we been taught maybe something incorrect? I challenge you to find any time when the world changed for the better, any instance in which that change wasn't instigated with an angry person, right? Isn't it somebody that's angry enough to stand up and do something about it, that uses that anger and channels it to bring good into the world? If you read through the Gospels, do you ever find Jesus kind of getting angry with folks from time to time, or maybe all the time, getting angry with the disciples? Anger itself is not bad. Anger itself is not bad. So Jesus seems to be talking about the object of our anger. If we can go to the next slide. I want everyone to look back and wave hi at Lindsay. Everyone say hi to Lindsay. Lindsay is operating our slides, and she's operating it on a very Apple product-based computer. That's a Macintosh computer from the year 2010. And this computer, the entire staff at church has to use that to prepare your worship service today. So our Jackie, our parish secretary, she has to get on the computer. I get on the computer. Matthew gets on the computer. And this computer is so special. It has this unique function that if you use your own computer, it might take you 30 seconds to do something, but this has a special function that adds 10 minutes to the project at no extra cost. And so this computer has instilled rage in everyone in the staff from time to time. But there's good news. We're getting a new computer this week, and we're going to have this wonderful ancient church ritual that will take place in the parking lot on Tuesday. With the old computer, we have to sort of put it to rest, and this is going to involve a baseball bat. So you're welcome to come join us on this ancient ritual with the baseball bat. We may actually live stream it on Facebook, and I'm going to be the first one to let my anger out on that, right? Sometimes, however, our anger can come out like swords and daggers. And if we look at what is Jesus really talking about here, what's he talking about? He's not saying don't be angry. He says, if you're angry with a brother or a sister, you will be liable to judgment. If you insult a brother or sister, if you say you fool or fill in the blank, he's talking about the people with whom we're in a relationship, right? Our anger can often provoke, and I know if you're in a relationship with somebody, do you have a little toolkit in the back of your pocket, an anger toolkit? And you got little tools that if you really want to get at your partner, you can pull out the screwdriver and just kind of poke them in the side. You got some tools that you use that you just do because you want to make them mad? Anybody willing to admit that? Okay, fine, but you have them, I know it. We love to be angry, especially when we have a sense that we're right. When we're right and the person that we're angry with is wrong, isn't that the best feeling of anger in the whole world? And you can't wait till they discover that they're wrong, and you can say, see, I told you so, and you can let them have it. Jesus talks about this anger, and he says this: when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift. What I'm about to tell you, I want you to immediately forget after I tell you, okay? Will you promise to do that? Jesus is saying when you come to the temple, or for in our sake, when you come to the church, hopefully today you've come with a great big generous offering to give to the church, and we all give generously because we need to support the ministry of the church. Jesus is saying if you're coming to the altar to bring your gift, set it aside if you know that you have conflict with your sister or your brother, with your brother in Christ, your child, your parent, your spouse, and go deal with the conflict. What's he saying there? He's saying our relationships are more important than the offerings that we bring to church. Now, please forget that. I said that. Deprogram that from your brains. Our relationships are more important than our offerings. The relationships in a church that go through the lens of Jesus Christ and go through the love of Jesus Christ is the heart and the soul of our life together. Those relationships that were strengthened in Houston, those relationships that pour out prayers with one another. So if you ask Jesus, what's more important, to be right or to be in a relationship? Jesus is telling us that that relationship is way more important than what it means to be right. I had the chance to go to India a few years ago with a Christian group of 13 or 14, mostly pastors, but some lay folks. And we went into cities and went into the villages. And we went into one village, and I actually wasn't there that day. I was preaching at another church. And the group went into this village, probably 500 poor Indian Christians gathered there at the service. And there was an older lady, and her camera was missing. And amid the entire community, she began to throw a fit because her camera was missing, and the local leader had to deal with this, and the entire community basically was accused of stealing this camera. An hour passes, and she discovers it's on the bus. Later on, the Indian pastor from New York that had organized the trip and I sat and talked about the incident, and we talked about it, and he said, in Indian culture, the relationships would have been so much more important than the camera that he wouldn't have even have brought it up. The relationship more important than a material object. Our anger, when it destroys part of God's community, but each of us has the potential to be the one that starts the reconciliation, to be the one that begins the healing, the one that begins the forgiveness. Each of you can do that when you let your light shine out in the world. This is what, we can go to the next slide. Bringing to the next one, you shall not commit adultery. I definitely need to go get the broom here. Okay, I'm going to start sweeping. Let's just not talk about any of this stuff, okay? Jesus says, you have heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery within his heart. So the good news, especially for you women, is Jesus is just talking to the guys. So you guys are fine. Just whatever you're all doing, just keep on doing it. It don't matter. He's just talking to the guys here. And we, of course, know what it is like to have desire and to lust and to look. But we see the transition that Jesus is making from the external covenant that's an outward-in covenant to an inward-out covenant. And he's looking at trying to heal and restore the insides of us. And what I want to focus more on, and it's a little bit challenging, is this conversation about divorce. Jesus says, whoever divorces his wife, let him give a certificate of divorce. But I say to you, anyone that divorces his wife causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, women, you guys are fine because he's just talking to the guys. You don't have to worry. Marriage has changed a lot over the years, hasn't it? This is written to the men primarily because back in the day, to be a woman in marriage was to be very weak and vulnerable, and just in terms of a pure power dynamic. Back in the day, if some commentators wrote that if the wife burnt the meal, the husband could issue a certificate of divorce. How would that be? Not too cool, right? And so Jesus is really trying to care for and protect the vulnerable within this marriage institution. Today, we have a lot different expectations out of marriage than back in the day, right? Nowadays, we expect our spouses to make us happy, to fulfill all our needs, to provide economic benefits, to do all sorts of things. It's very hard, right? We're blessed within this congregation to have people that have been married a long, long time. What's our long marriages? We have a lot of young people here at church. How long have the Matsons been married? 1958. Can we give them a Thanksgiving? I can't even do the math. I don't even know how long that is. That's a long time. What's that? 60 years. That's this year. Congratulations. Most of us, when we get married, have visions of being able to say one day that we've been married for 60 years. In truth, it doesn't happen that way for a lot of us. I've came out to New Song knowing that it was the beginning of a transition for myself in marriage, and that divorce for me is getting close to done. And so very shortly, you all are going to have a divorced pastor. Not what I had hoped for, and it is not through a lack of trying, but it is what it is. And I guess I pray that church can be a place where we come and we walk through these doors and we receive and share the love and grace of God. I had a conversation with the person that read the lesson for 9:15, and she was trepidatious about doing the reading, and she said, you know what I just don't like about this whole conversation is all the judgment that surrounds divorce. Turns out Jesus is going to address that topic of judgment in a couple weeks, as judgment is not part of our Christian ethos, is it? We come looking for renewal in life, and sometimes when that flame goes out, for whatever reason, we all have different stories. What amazing place to be able to walk through these doors and feel the love and forgiveness of God. We want our children to grow up and to find suitable lifelong partners, and we want to walk with one another as we go through. But let's make a promise that whoever walks through these doors, LGBT, people of different backgrounds, people going through great suffering in the world, when you walk through this door, promise that each of us can be a beacon of love and life for that person. Can we try to promise that? Because at the end of the day, this is what Jesus is really getting at with these chapters, is he's challenging us to be holy. At the very end of this passage, he says, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I don't know about you, when I hear that word, be perfect, I just kind of throw it in the trash because it just seems impossible. I haven't met a perfect person yet. I've met a couple people that are kind of close, to be honest. But what if we thought of the word to mean be holy? Instead of all in America, we are great at excelling and achieving and trying to get a perfect SAT score. What if Jesus meant to be holy as your heavenly Father is holy? And that when our lights shine out in the world, that we have the chance to be a holy agent for God's kingdom. How else can we explain the stuff that talks about turning the other cheek? I bet very few of us actually practice this passage of turn the other cheek. How many of us were raised, no laughing at my sermons, how many of us, especially us men, were raised to learn how to defend yourself in a situation of a fight, and to learn how to get we want to teach our men to be tough and to be protected, right? And so you teach a kid how to box and do all this other stuff. Here's a little phrase. Jesus said, "You have heard it say an eye for an eye, but I say to you, if somebody slaps you, you offer the other cheek as well." Here's a little boy. It threw him off when I turned the other cheek. So then I whacked him a good one. This actually happened to me as a kid, by the way. I was maybe in second grade on the playground in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, with my best friend Kirk Farber. And we had those ski suits, or those snow suits, probably 2 sizes too big. And we're in first grade, kind of waddling through the playground, and these 2 third graders came, and they shoved us to the ground. And I was laying on the ground, and my friend Kirk was getting ready to get up and do something, and I yelled back to him, "Turn the other cheek, just stay on the ground." And then they walked away. So it actually turned out to be very good. It helped me. It saved me from getting a beating that day. Is Jesus telling us to be wimpy? When Jesus says to turn the other cheek, to love our enemies, and to pray for our enemies, is he teaching us to be weak and wimpy and soft? Do you think that's true? I don't. Instead, if John comes up and gives me a slap on the cheek, tries to assert his power over me, and I stand and I take it and I offer him the other cheek as well, what's he going to do? Who's showing the true power in that case? This phrase, turn the other cheek, has transformed the world, and not in many chances. It has inspired people to stand up strong. Imagine the civil rights movement. People of all denominations, people of all walks of life, different backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, took these words and transformed our culture. Because it took every single one of them, when they found out that they were going to go into public protest, and that they would be met with dogs barking at them this close to their face, and that they would be met with fire hoses sprayed on them. And they said, none of you can fight back. None of you can fight back. And each one to a T took that and stood up strong, turned the other cheek. That changed the world. They were holy. At the end of the day, what Jesus wants us to hear in these stories is that we care and nurture and love our neighbor and our enemy. I was listening to the radio yesterday. I'll close with this. And there was TED Talks. You've heard of the TED Talks? There was a guy who would make these sort of satirical videos and put them on the internet, on the YouTube thing. And as with anything that gets posted on YouTube, people can comment on them, and everybody writes very nice, healthy, wholesome, friendly, supportive, constructive criticism, right? there's a few that can write the most vile, vulgar, destructive, hateful comments that you could imagine. And so he would get a series of these comments, and you know what he started to do? He would find their contact information, and he would call them on the phone, and he would interview them, ask them about their lives, where they're from, what their experiences are, and eventually they'd get around to asking them why they posted whatever they posted. And he actually created a sort of form of dialogue, and all these dialogues now are on the internet on a new podcast, and these dialogues have helped transform the very people that were writing the hateful comments on it. Being holy. Imagine the spirit of God's power if each one of us fully understood the power we have to go out into the world and to be agents of holiness, agents of forgiveness, agents of reconciliation, agents of God's love. Turns out we have it. Amen.